I'm not doing Portugal today. That's coming next week because I'm still not completely done with it yet. And I don't want to get into something that's half done. I want you to be able to enjoy exactly what I'm doing and what I'm finding. And what I found is going to completely blow your mind. Trust me. You thought Navarre was convincing? You wait until you see what I found in Portugal and what they hid inside the map itself, which was completely amazing to me. But anyway, I'm taking a break real quick so I can, through my busy day. But you guys are worth it. You're more important. So I am definitely going to give you a good video today. I am going over page 1 of the Voynich manuscript and go over with you, of course, my theories of why I believe that Roger Bacon was tied to the manuscript itself, and some history about who owned the manuscript. And then, of course, on page 1, I am going to show you in the lines where they hid the symbols and how page 1 tells exactly what they're doing and why they want to do it. This is definitely going to be a video you don't want to miss, trust me. So, one thing, if you have a magnifying glass, grab a magnifying glass, because what I'm going to show you might be a little easier, although I believe you can see it because it's blown up enough where you can see the symbols. But if you have a magnifying glass, that's what I use to read these symbols, so I don't distort them when I blow them up too big. I do have them blown up quite large here, and you'll still see the symbols clearly, but as far as reading them, I can't have them that distorted and pixelated. They have to be smaller. And that's another thing that I'm going to prove to you. They did have magnifying glasses. They even had microscopic lenses in this time. Even though the microscope wasn't invented until 16-something, supposedly. But it was, trust me. And I've got historical validation to prove that. Okay. Anybody who knows the Voynich manuscript or has heard of the Voynich manuscript or followed the Voynich manuscript knows that the name Roger Bacon has been tied to this manuscript since a letter was brought to King Rudolph saying that this was the work of Roger Bacon, and King Rudolph bought it for 600 ducats. This has been documented in history as being seen by some very prominent people, enough so that they took it at its face value. So, starting out with Roger Bacon. Now, Roger Bacon was a 13th century alchemist who was heavily into botany, and he also did a lot of experiments, and he was an inventor, kind of like the Leonardo da Vinci of their time. Roger Bacon was an intelligent man, well above his years, advanced well above his years. He was a college professor. He studied in college, and he was the inventor of the magnifying glass. Now, I've got a picture of Roger Bacon here. It's actually not a picture. It is the statue that stands at the college or courtyard. And I want to read you a few things about Roger Bacon. I've got a lot of links that you can familiarize yourself with him. Just follow the links, stay on the links. It's really full of interesting information, depending on how far you want to get into it, to understand who Roger Bacon is. But anyway, the magnifying glass was invented by the Franciscan friar and scholar Roger Bacon in the UK. He was born somewhere around 1214. They're not exactly for sure when his date of birth was, but they definitely know his date of death was in 1292 in Oxford, UK. The first mention of its use was in 1268 when he adapted its use as primitive spectacles for scholars whose eyes were failing them. He had great respect for knowledge. He was into knowledge. Anything that would expand your thought or your mind, he was definitely into. Roger Bacon was a great man. He was misunderstood, I should say, in his time, though. He claimed that his telescope, now a telescope, not just a magnifying glass, but he said that he invented a telescope that could foresee future events. Because of this, they imprisoned him for 14 years and they called him a sorcerer. He no longer taught students. He was no longer allowed by the churches to participate in learning unless he submitted them with his work, and then they decided whether or not he was going to be able to teach that or not. So he was very limited because of his knowledge, and they didn't understand him. So they were very, very afraid, I think. I think that's what the problem was. They were afraid because they didn't understand where this knowledge come about and where the ability that he had came from. As I said, he was very intelligent. He was like a Da Vinci of their time. He invented things. He, you know, constantly increased in the ability to invent more and more and more. Okay, so the thing I want to connect with Roger Bacon is he was very adamant that everyone should learn the Hebrew language because of the integrity and because of their intelligence. So he highly spoke of the Jewish people. He was Catholic and he practiced Catholicism, but the Jewish people were intelligent, and he spoke of that, and he spoke of the Hebrew knowledge and the Hebrew language, and he actually studied with Jewish scribes to learn their language. Now, because he was learning and studying with the Jewish scribes and the Jewish community, there was an ample opportunity there to share knowledge. He shared with them, they taught him the language. Because what they used to create this manuscript was by no means any less than a magnifying glass or even a microscope, because the lettering is so small. They had the ability to be able to do that. And I also have links in here where even in 18-something and in 1968 or 1986, I'm not quite sure which one it was, but the Jewish Quarterly wrote about Roger Bacon and his increased knowledge of a man above his years. Everything that he stood for, they backed up. They praised him. They believed that the world was wrong. And for the Jewish nation to still, 500-600 years later, still back this gentleman, it had to have been the fact is because the Jewish have always been thankful for what the knowledge he shared with them. Now, they could not have done this any other way if they didn't have a telescopic lens, if they didn't have a magnifying glass, or even a microscopic lens. They would never be able to put the symbols inside the lines. And I'm going to show you them because I've got visuals for you to look at where I see the symbols are. And I'm going to show you. But anyway, Roger Bacon had a working knowledge in microscopy and possessed an instrument very much like a modern telescope. He claimed that his telescope could make the most distant objects appear near, that it would make stars appear at will, and even further, that it had the power of visualizing future events. Now, I have links there that will give you all the history on Roger Bacon and all of his inventions, what he did, how he come about it, his prison term of 14 years because they said he was a sorcerer and he wasn't allowed to teach anymore. After he served his 14-year prison sentence, he lived about 3 years after that, and he didn't teach after that. He wrote a couple of more works, and that link will tell you exactly what it is that he wrote. But he pretty much was defeated. He was defeated because of the people not ready for his knowledge at that time. He was well advanced and they didn't know how to handle it. But I believe the Jewish people did, and they respected him for that. They taught him Hebrew, and he in turn, I believe, now this is my theory, he in turn had the capable ability of sharing his ideas and his knowledge with them. Because he knew how intelligent the Jewish people were, and he knew how important their documents were, and how important their heritage was, and that they would do anything to salvage it. And they knew the secrecy, Jewish were very secret people, and he knew that he could trust them with that. So I believe that's why. So in my theory altogether, and then I got a couple of more links down at the bottom where it says that the connection with the Jewish quarterly speaking on Roger Bacon's behalf 400 years later. I got a couple links there that you can read for that, because that is some very interesting stuff. How they really, the way they eloquently speak of this man that they didn't even know. It had to have been taught to them. It had to have been told to them with such great passion that they can review it and write about it now. It's amazing. So, I mean, when you get time, you should really read those links because it's great. But Bacon had argued that more accurate experimental knowledge of nature would be of great value in confirming the Christian faith. So, he was a very logical thinker, and he was, as I said, advanced way more above his time. All right, in my conclusion, I said that Roger Bacon's name was intentionally pegged by the Jewish men writing the manuscript for many reasons. One, because without his invention, they would not be able to achieve the ability that they set out to do when it come to hiding the symbols inside the art, which they call the visual symbols that you see, they call art. Because it really, I can't say that really. I'm not even going to say that, because I can't say that they don't really have any value, because I believe that there's letters that do have the value, but most of them seem sporadic, and that's why no AI would ever be able to pick it up, because they're sporadically placed, and the story is inside the lines, and page 1 tells us that. This is going to be really interesting. But anyway, 2, because they had the ability to magnification. The idea of hiding the true story within the lines was achievable, because they could do it and magnify it and write within time inside the lines. And no one would think, by looking at the manuscript, because it's so small, no one would think that there would be anything inside the symbols, but I'm going to prove there is. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. 3, he was respected not only by the Jewish people, but by the greed of men and anyone suffering from illnesses back then. He was highly collectible, and the kings paid good money for his work. I believe the Jewish men creating the manuscript knew this, and it was another way to ensure its safety. Now, back in Ian's time, in the Christian Crusades and in the mid-century, or the Middle Ages, any medical book was highly sought after by any kingdom, because they wanted to have the ability to possess knowledge of any illnesses. That would be if their doctors could figure it out, the code, or whatever it was, they would have the knowledge of healing, and everyone would be relied on them to become healed, and which meant more money. And the kingdoms were all about dominance and monetary value. It was all about money back then. It was a greedy time, but that's the way it was. And the kings told their henchmen and told all the men that when you find anything that is written in code and it looks like it's about medical, don't destroy it. Bring it back to me, and it will serve your king well. So anything. So no wonder Ian and them, living in that time, knew this. I mean, this was well known that they were destroying all manuscripts except for the ones that look like medical manuscripts. So why wouldn't they hide a secret within a fictitious medical manuscript? And, you know, why wouldn't they? That's perfect. It's a perfect thing. That right there will ensure the safety of the manuscript if it ever got into the hands of someone other than the Jewish nation. And somewhere along the line they did lose it. Somewhere along the line they lost the manuscript. They lost control of it. And that's another theory I have. Well, not how they lost it. I have no idea. I can't even theorize on how I thought that they would lose it. But I do have a theory of why it ended up at the Jesuit college. and I'm coming to that. Now, King Rudolph, there is a picture of King Rudolph. King Rudolph was the king of Croatia. No, yeah, was it Croatia? Croatia, yeah. He was the king of Croatia, and it was said that Rudolph's legacy was traditionally been viewed in three ways. He was influential ruler whose mistakes led to the 30-Year War. He wasn't perfect. I mean, this guy definitely, he was very arrogant. That's a good way of putting it. He was very arrogant. Well, it was said that, according to some reports, a book was brought to his court claiming to be the work of Roger Bacon. And because everyone knew Roger Bacon 200 years after he died, because of his ability and because of his knowledge, they wanted anything to do with him. He was highly, highly collectible. Just like any painter back then in the Renaissance time. They didn't become popular until after they died. Then that's when they ended up becoming very, very sought after and collected. And this is the same thing with Roger Bacon. He was a man above his means and a man above his time back then, and everybody wanted anything to do with it, especially the kingdoms. So, he bought it for 600 ducats, which in our time now is about $100,000. So that shows how important this manuscript was. And if you go and look up the history of the Voynich manuscript, previous owners, they will give you a timeline, a broke down timeline of who owned it. The last one with written proof to own the Voynich manuscript was D. Tipence, and he was a personal physician of King Rudolph, because King Rudolph come down ill and none of his doctors can cure him. But Jacob Synipsis, I think his name is, Synipius, or something. I probably hacked his name up. I'm so sorry. But I'll just call him Tipence, because that's who he was named after he cured the king. And it was said that the king gave him the book of the Voynich manuscript after that, and signed his name on the bottom. Now, when Wilfrid Voynich got the manuscript in 1912, he noticed that there was a signature on the bottom, and he tried to bring it out. And by doing so, he kind of damaged it, but ultraviolet lights definitely shows the name Tipence. Now, it was not unheard of for book collectors and them to claim ownership and property by signing the name on the first page. He's got many works in museums now with his name signed on the front page of the book. So this just goes to prove that Tipence did own the manuscript. He was the personal physician of Rudolph the king, who bought it because Roger Bacon was the one who was supposedly tied to the manuscript, and because of his collectability, King Rudolph bought it and then gave it to the only man who could cure him. Tipence, now, of course, there's links, more information. I love links and information because sometimes you just get bored, you want to go back and look at it. Tipence was the last reported one. Now, hearsay says 2 other people owned it after him, but there's no validation or historical documentation to even back that up. It was just all hearsay. And as far as hearsay goes, it wasn't from reliable sources enough that they could even say, yes, I'm going to say that this person owned it. Not like the letter to Rudolph, King Rudolph, when it said that the book was tied to Roger Bacon. That was valid. That was verified because of the validity of the people that said that this was true. I saw the letter. Like the New Testament. You know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all wrote about the same thing, but wrote it in their own way. But yet the basic facts were there. And that's what they got from these people, was the basic facts. They were all the same. The story may have been different, but the facts were the same. So they went ahead to say that, yeah, a letter did exist, even though they don't have a letter in existence that I know of, or they didn't. But Tipence was given the Voynich estate and the Voynich manuscript, and it was signed over to him by King Rudolph because he was the one who healed him with his alchemic potions and all that. He actually healed the king, and the king was very grateful. Even his own doctors couldn't do it. So Depence fell off of a horse, and a year later died. But before he died, he moved into the Clementum at the care of the Jesuits. And when he died, he left them 50,000 gold coins and his Voynich estate. Now, everybody knows that whenever somebody has an estate, it's everything that they own. He owned the manuscript. The manuscript was bought from a Jesuits college in Italy. This is in Italy. This is where he died. Not the same place, but the Jesuits still held on to it. And it said that the manuscript disappeared. Just vanished until Wilfrid Voynich brought it in. Well, Wilfrid Voynich brought it out when he bought a collection of books from an estate at the Jesuit college. I believe that he donated it to the Jesuits, that Depence did, when he died with them. And he left them all that money and his Voynich estate, which included all of his books and everything. So I believe that the other two's verifying that they had the possession of the manuscript after that. I'm not saying that it's a lie. The validity of the story is not very, is not good enough to say, wow, yeah, two other people owned it, but then the Jesuits ended up with it again. No, I believe that the Jesuits had it from the time that Depence passed on and left them his estate. So, Bacon was tied to the manuscript intentionally, I believe, by the Jewish people because they were aware of his knowledge even 200 years prior to them creating this, because I believe that it was a part of their history about this gentleman because of what they've given him, what they've given them, the knowledge and the use of telescopic lenses, microscopic lenses, magnifying glasses. And although the microscopic lens wasn't invented until 1650 something, I believe they had prior knowledge of its use because I believe that Roger Bacon learned Hebrew from them, and in return he gave them the knowledge of what he had, because nobody else back then at that time even wanted to hear about it. They just wanted to imprison him because they couldn't understand the intense increased knowledge this gentleman had. But I believe that the Jewish people knew. I believe that they understood it and they respected him for that. And for trading off and on one bit of knowledge to another, because it was said often that he wanted to learn Hebrew, and he sought after being taught by Jewish scribes. So that makes me believe that his name was tied intentionally, because they knew then that his work was collectible, and they knew that it had to look like a medical book, and they knew that it had to look odd. And all of this is described in page 1, the oddity of the art anyway. So you can read about Bacon and King Rudolph and how everybody ties in together. Now, hold on just a second, I gotta take a drink. I talk a lot. Okay. Page 1 of the Voynich manuscript. I am given no voice in Hispania. Now, they didn't call Spain until after Christopher Columbus in 1492, when it was New America. They gave it the name Spain. Before that, it was called Hispania. I am given no voice here in Hispania. However, I will express freely and clearly in this era by documenting well, which is denied. Along with a respected group of men, Ian also means Johann in Hebrew, or broke down to John. I believe they use the name Ian, but it's a shortened variant of Johann, because it's shorter and it's easier to write than it is, to write out Johann. So it says, I, Ian, have been granted permission to acquire and discuss the concealment and placement of authentic relics. We will yield to the pen with precise precision and understanding due to the occasion that has risen. There is need to retain the memory of the artifacts there is need to retain the memory of the artifacts in our journey for a long time. It was made clear to all members that we must keep it hidden and it must remain undefinable. Our irony in this time of year, we are likely to suffer harm or danger. Now, I have a link there that tells you all the genocides and everything that Jewish people went in from 1106 to 1398. It gives you the history of what happened. And they do mention Seville. I believe that's on page 2, though. They do mention Seville, and there was a massive genocide in Seville where thousands of Jews were killed, and it was horrible. It was horrible. They went under persecution. They've been under persecution since the time of Christ, actually, since the death of Christ, and a lot of people blame them for the murdering of God and all of that. God does tell us that He made them blind, but He will open their eyes again. But they still believed in their religion. They believe passionately in their religion. Okay, as I said, there's a link there. Please check these links out because they're amazing. There's a lot of extra history there. I saw an opportunity with the people of the pilgrimage and made an emotional appeal. We took shelter in the meadow and set ourselves apart with the laws of God for the safety of all others. The relics are our equality to righteousness and justice in this year of our Lord. So basically what they're saying is the 10 Commandments, the laws of God, are what they adhere to, not to what they're having to face in the world today, in the year of our Lord. So they hid with their law. They didn't want to succumb to the other laws because they didn't believe in them. Doing what we need to keep them out of sight so they are not discovered and seized. Oh, the weariness I have for the right to retain possession of the genuine, authentic relics that God Himself had numbered. Now, what they're saying here, I'm not for sure, but as I said, all of this is my theory. You know, not that the pages and the symbols that I'm finding inside the lines in the story that I'm coming with isn't real, because it is real. This is what's coming out for me. So I stand behind that 100%. I'm talking about the 10 Commandments. When Moses went up to the mountain and he stood in the light with God for 40 days, he was up there. And God, it said that God Himself, with the finger of God, labeled the 10 Commandments. And when Moses come down after 40 days, and the people of Israel had manifested themselves this golden calf to worship, and that's what they were bowing down to, Moses threw the tablets, and when he did, in anger, they broke. And then later on, Moses scribed the 10 Commandments himself in tablets, and God approved them. So what if, in the Quran, in the Torah, it also says that the tablets that the finger of God numbered Himself, they were on blue sapphire. The tablets were created on blue sapphire. I mean, think about that. How beautiful is that? What if these are the 10 Commandments that they're salvaging? The original ones written by the finger of God. What if that is what they have and they're trying to hold on to by hiding? Leaves just something to think about. That's for definitely sure, because it is documented in the Bible that there were two separate stones, or two separate sets of the 10 Commandments. One that God did and one that Moses achieved as far as their Quran goes. So who knows? It's just something makes you wonder. Really does make you wonder. Well, anyway, we talk among ourselves and give worship at Navarra. They called it Navarra, not Navarre. They called it Navarra back then. Well, at least that's what I'm getting out of it anyway. Navarra in a secret dwelling until we leave for Galatia. It is an era of troubled times here at Tudela. We cannot speak of the rebirth and the new life we are giving. We show little enthusiasm. Our yad is very small and divides us from harmony in this land. So what he's saying here is their religion separates them. And they don't draw attention to themselves. That's why they show little enthusiasm. They don't do anything to draw attention to themselves, because their religion is not looked upon. And it divides them from the harmony of everybody else being able to do what they want. But the Jewish people really couldn't. They had stipulations that most didn't. And that's why it was hard for them a lot. You know, a lot of times it was hard. But anyway, I've got links for the Jewish life and laws in Navarra, in Tudela at that time. You can check that out. We will catalog the placement of the laws from the Torah on vellum instead of a wooden plaque used for a chanted prayer. Like the Vedas are sequenced. They possess a solemn promise to preserve their future. Now the Vedas are old, the oldest scriptures, like 6,000 years old, 5,000, 6,000 years old, that have preserved over all of those years. That's what they're looking for. They're striving for the same thing. They want them to be like the Vedas. 6,000 years from now, we want our work to be here. So they chose to do it on vellum and not wood. You know, wood would rot away a lot easier, collect humidity, and rot quicker than the dried parchment. The vellum, you know, vellum is, some of them, the pages they say are really thick. So I don't know. I've never seen the Voynich manuscript physically. I would love to, but I've never seen the manuscript physically. But they say that it's thick, so it's well preserved. And I have links to the Vedas and all that, so you can get more information on that. That is definitely an interesting thing to look into, because it's very... I'm into history. I'm just a history nut. So, you know, anything that can verify and back everything up that I'm coming out with, I love, because it's like, how could I come up with this if it's not true and it's not being written? It says, we will use green water rivers to donate the civil rights that they deny us. Okay, now the green waters is just a visual. The rivers are flowing, free-flowing, you know, shows movement, shows how they can move around. But not the Jewish people, but everyone else has freedom to do what they want. They can flow freely. They can move here and there and not be worried about being of the Jewish culture and having stipulations and all of that. They were under heavy rule, and they didn't like it. A vivid water channel represents the atheistic religions intertwined in the region, which any religion that was not of a Jewish, they believed were atheistic, because they don't believe that, they didn't believe in the same God. So anybody who was not a Jewish person and their religion was atheistic to them. Yogini women will be a symbol of a citizens who praise God's mercy and survive with shrewdness, with feasible knowledge, giving them the ability to make judgments for a long life. Now, they are talking about the Muslim here. Muslims and mainly Muslims, I believe, because there was still a lot of Muslims then. It was ruled by Muslims for a long time until the Christian reign finally took it over in the mid-15th century. But they're talking about the Muslims when it says, foolish people causing malice and a spiteful due to dissatisfaction from the lack of interest. His Eminence Prophet Muhammad's beliefs prosper in venues. I am envious of their open practice with no restrictions. So they can open their churches and they can do all of this in the public and enjoy themselves and feel free in their spirit and not have any, you know, any hesitation in opening up and talking about it. But yet the Jewish people do. They're afraid. They have to hide because they know the persecution that they will go through. And that's why they said that they are envious of their open practice with no restrictions. The Jews are restricted and they can't open and freely practice their religion. Nirvana, grace, and ancient vigor of strength and good health are what give them enthusiasm and allow domesticated free living. They persuade and influence those who listen to modify their human spirit, giving them a place of unfounded peace. We, however, live in the truth, and a watchful eye for the vermin come. Now, see, I love that. I love what he says here, where they say, you know, they're influenced and persuaded to listen, to modify their human spirit. Muhammad was really about finding your inner peace and your inner, self. It was almost like a hypnotic sense, like yoga, how you go someplace and all that. That's what their religion was based on, and that's how you got to find that peace and contentment, is when you can find that peace within yourself. But he's saying here, but we live in the truth, and a watchful eye for the vermin come. They live in the truth of their world now, because they don't have that freedom to practice openly. They don't have that. And the vermin will come for them. The enemy will come for them if they are caught practicing it in the open, and they know this. So they hide. They hide. And I can see where Ian says that he's envious of their open practice, because when you're passionate about something, all you want to do is be open and honest and rejoice and all this, and you can't. You have to hide in silence and worship and practice and pray in hiding, and that is fearful, because they know that they will die if they get caught. The bell rings solemnly at the place of the prophet. We are excited to visit it, to see it with wide eyes. I will seek out shelter within the mass who wishes to view it also. So he is pre-planning here. He's going to be going with the pilgrimage, and he's going to be going to the Santiago de Compostela, where the prophet James, the disciple of Jesus, is buried. We will get into him more when they get into him. I believe it's on page 3, when they talk about the prophet who was beheaded, and he was beheaded for Christ. But on page 3 that happens, and that was another thing that just drove me crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, all of this history coming out, and it's verifiable. That's what's so amazing about it. But he goes, Ian, February 25th, 1451. Okay? They were documenting this a year. The Navarre's War was between 1451 and 1454, I believe. It was a 4-year war. It didn't start getting really bad until towards the end of 51, and I believe that's when they wrapped everything up that they could and departed in 52, in the beginning of 52, because I believe 1452, March of 1452 is the first date I got when they left, I believe. But they had a year to do this book, because on the map page, when I said the column said that the rabbi sensed trouble in the area. So because he heard of what was going on, even though the war didn't fully break out yet, he sensed that there was going to be trouble. They were always on high alert, and if they were protecting something that was very sacred and precious to them, they weren't going to take a chance. So they said, let's do it, let's hide it, just in case it all breaks down and goes crazy, we'll have it out of there. So they started a year before they left. And it says, fine calf skin was used for the writing of the symbols. They were deliberately made to reject any artistic technique, relying on bright color and bold directness that gives no perspective. I took pride in its creation and oversee work intently. I will intervene in the art produced to see it is suitable. Inside the lines. Now, inside the lines, okay? They're talking, the symbols are art. That's what they're saying. Symbols and art, that's all they are. But when they say inside the lines, the Word of God lives. That's the key point. Inside the lines of the art, the Word of God lives. And I'm going to prove it. I'll show it to you. Very tedious work to save the laws, to keep possession of the written work until the job is done. All symbols will verify and bring a new consciousness of life. Hidden from the world in the art. Key. Hidden from the world in the art is an ideal place to conceal the truth and retain its safety. Now, let's take a look at the symbols. Now this is where you need your magnifying glass if you have a magnifying glass. As I said, I blew them up enough where you could be able to look at them and see what it is that I'm talking about. But if you look, I use a magnifying glass. I use a magnifying glass because when I blow them up and I need to read them and break them down, it gets too distorted. So if I leave them small and use a magnifying glass, I can clearly see them. But look at the arrows. Look at the symbols. This is a random symbol. This is a random symbol. And I concentrated all light value and extrusion and burning tools, as well as dodging tools and light shades and manipulations to bring out what's inside the line. Okay? Now, look at the symbols that are inside the line. Each symbol itself contains anywhere from 20 to 25 symbols. Okay? And each symbol is a word. So, you're looking at a paragraph right there. Basically. That's why everybody asks me, how do you get so much out of those symbols? How can you say that much? Well, the only reason I could say that much is because that's how many words I'm getting out of the symbol. If you take a page of 20 symbols and you're getting like 30 words minimum, or even maximum 30 words per symbol, I mean, you've got 2 pages of writing right there. These guys were ingenious, I swear. And then this is the stone on the wheel page. If you look at the stone, if you use your magnifying glass with this one, you'll be able to see that the symbols go completely around the whole stone. But you can clearly see the symbols that are written inside the stone right there. And this next one, the third picture, is of a symbol, and then the same symbol below it with light manipulation, so you can see how the symbols are stuck inside the lines. Use your magnifying glass, or you can look and see them. Now, on the second set of black lines on the top of the symbol, you can clearly see an N. Now, the only time that I've noticed that E, N, S, or W are being used is when they're giving directions. So this, I don't know what they're talking about. I haven't even made it on this page. In my lifetime, I might not. I mean, it takes forever to do one section. It takes me over a week if I work on it every day just to do a portion of the map. That's how much. Now, if I could have everything stripped down to where I can get to the symbols easy without having to manipulate everything and bring them out before I can even start reading them. It's the bringing them out is the tough part. But once I get them, then I get the story. Now he goes on to say, working with a tool that requires steady rhythmic movements is a natural ability, not something learned. Because of the vanity of the unjust living, we cannot leave it unprotected. It must be undefinable, or we will deny life to the laws that God has numbered. We never show a lack of experience and judgment that is weak. We never struggle with enthusiasm. We are working against the malice and the bitterness of the living here in this era. The kingdoms must want to take it and covet its appearance. This will ensure its safety. The whole event was lively and somewhat enjoyable. Persuasion and influence are our guides in transforming the resting place with symbols of art for the better. I strive for the best source of concealment. So much worry about seeing that it was completed and produced. We will openly hide our light from the darkness of evil. So they're going to openly hide their light, their laws, their treasure, and what they covet. They're going to openly hide it to anyone who looks at this book, and they're not even going to know it's there. See, that's the intelligence that these Jewish people had. That's the intelligence that the creators of the manuscript had. You would not even know that there was anything inside those lines. You wouldn't even know it by looking at it because of the flair and the artistic. But I proved there is. I proved there is. Just like they said. They hid it within the art. Wait till you get to page 2. Page 2 is amazing. And it says, I strive for the best source of concealment. So much worry about seeing that this is completed and produced. We will openly hide our light from the darkness of evil. No other work or study will compare to the authentic script that I aspired to create in protecting the laws of God, for it was done for life. He's even stating here, he wants it so desirable that no other work or study will compare to the authentic script that he had created. Think about it. Think, wow. Oh. And I gave you another link for the Navarre Civil War, like I did before. You know all about that. But go back, look at the symbols that are hidden within the work that you could see. Make your own. Make your own judgment. Is it true? Is what I'm saying right? Are they really symbols? People keep saying that it's vellum. Vellum shows symbols like that. Yes, it does. It does. When you look at vellum with a microscope, it does show symbols. It shows little 3s, 5s, squiggly 2s, and stuff like that. These symbols are uniformed within a line. They're uniformed, they're different, they're individualized, they're there purposely. They were purposely put there just like first page is telling us. They are disguising the Word of God within the line, within the lines of the art. That's where the truth lies, and that's where I'm getting the story from, is inside the lines. I'm not messing with the symbols. The symbols don't have any importance to me right now that I know where the true story lies. I want the real story. Now, next week, I'm going to do Portugal. Oh my gosh, you are going to just be so blown away with Portugal, and it's so interesting. What I found, I was just like, oh, are you kidding me? I wanted to make a video right then and get it up for you guys, but I figured, no, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to have everything in order, so I don't have to worry about it, and you can look at it and say, oh my gosh, that's true. That is so true. But Portugal will be next week, and then the following week after that, I'm going to do page 2. Then we'll go to Ponte de Lima and Viana do Castelo by the Lima Bridge, and then I'll do page 3. So that'll give me some, something to do to, get it out. But I also want everyone who just started to follow me to understand the story and to understand what's going on and what it is I'm doing. Because it's important. I believe that there's a story being told here for a reason. Everything in life happens for a reason. It happened for Kevin Bacon meeting the Jewish people. It happened for the Jewish people getting the information that they need to create this beautiful, beautiful masterpiece, very intelligently put together. They sought out to do something, and it worked. They were not going to be satisfied until they knew that it was going to live forever. And here it is, 700 years later, still going strong. And in a very safe place where it's not ever going to be destroyed. But thanks to their scans, I have the digital copies that don't smear when I blow them up, so I can find the story and I can work on it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed it. It was very interesting, wasn't it? Yeah. I hope you thought so, because I do. Page 2 is crazy, crazy. Page 3 is full of information. Page 4 will blow your mind, and the wheel will change your life. Trust me. Well, anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get off of here. I just took a break so I could do this and get it out there, because I know how badly, some people want to hear it. Even if I'm touching just one, that's all that matters to me. Anyway, peace, joy, love, hope, all fill your heart, please. Just let that be what leads you. Let that be your drive. We're living in a scary world. Our world is pretty much as scary as it was for them now. I don't even want to get into this world. God will take care of it, I'm sure. But until then, let's keep love and hope alive. And I will see you next week with a reveal that is guaranteed to make you say, by George, I think she's got it. Until then, guys, be safe. Love you. Bye.